All right. With much fanfare, I'd like to welcome everybody to the study session, and I'd like to call the meeting to order. Item number 1, presentation and discussion of the Heritage District Wayfinding and Place Marketing Plan.
Hello. I am Nicole Norgren with Multi Studio, and I'll be giving the presentation today about the Wayfinding and Place Marketing project for the Heritage District. So I am with Multi Studio. We are a multidisciplinary design firm located here in the Valley, where we believe that design collaboration is always in the pursuit of possibility. So we're going to show you and bring you along in our process today as to the possibility that we found within this project. So just to recap really quickly the scope of this project, we are looking at wayfinding and place marketing for the Heritage District. The goals of the project were to capture the character of the district while building a flexible and comprehensive signage system to aid in wayfinding and place marketing to create that expanded sense of place. We know that we are celebrating and balancing both the modern and the historical aspects of the district. And we're looking for something that complements and doesn't distract or compete with the existing environment. The first part of our process was an intake, integrate, and understand phase. We looked at a whole slew of documents that have been developed by the town, from various design plans to strategic plans to all of those efforts that have been done, to really see how we can align this project and move this forward. We also did a whole series of robust stakeholder engagement, so both a project team consisting of town staff, as well as an external stakeholder group, and as well as a general community survey. So we sent out a survey that had over 800 results come back in, answering questions, everything from what does the Heritage District feel like, what does it emulate, what are some attributes, what are your favorite parts, down to what are the challenges you may come across during your visit to the Heritage District. Why do you come to the Heritage District? Why do you not come to the Heritage District? And also, do you know what the Heritage District is? One of the things we asked too was the naming conventions of Downtown Gilbert versus Heritage District and all of that, and you'll start to see some results that came forth from that. So we took all of those results and kind of analyzed and synthesized those down into key takeaways and components. So while the majority of people do identify kind of Downtown Gilbert synonymously with Heritage District, we really wanted to lean into the Heritage District from a place marketing perspective, because while everybody has a downtown, Gilbert has a Heritage District, and that's special and that's unique and that needs to be celebrated. Another key takeaway came from the wayfinding side of things. The number one challenge that people have while in the district is finding parking. So being able to create a system that helps aid people in that effort is something that came to the forefront and a goal you'll see come to fruition in the designs. Another challenge came about was that people go here during certain times of the day or certain times of the week for one thing. And the goal with this project from a place marketing and wayfinding perspective was how can we keep people in the district longer to help them explore all of the things that maybe they didn't know were in the district. So from all of that, we took all of those key takeaways from everything from the attributes to the types of experiences people are looking for, to their visual reflections. Does this feel too modern? Does this feel too historic? And all of that to coalesce into these 4 big must-haves that help to guide the project moving forward. So we knew that we needed to communicate the character clearly, that there was a very large response to the character within the surveys and within the work, that we wanted to visualize the historic stories in perhaps new ways, that the system did indeed need to be robust and flexible. As you continue to grow, as businesses continue to kind of move in and things develop, it needs to be flexible over time. And it also needs to create a sense of place and help to unify all of the existing motifs that might be happening. So we know that there are the Hearn hoop lights. We know that there are these gravings in the parking and in the roads. There's the lines and the swirls, and all of that has very rich story to it. And how can we help to unify that with this project? All of that led to us creating this unifying concept statement. Where we've landed is cultivate character. So the Heritage District has roots that run strong and deep. Over the years, this rich history has cultivated Gilbert's unique experience. Areas brimming with character add texture to the patchwork of historical agriculture and celebrate the diversity and complexity of the community and its goals to bridge the past and cross-pollinate the future. From this written statement, we then moved into the visualization of this statement, utilizing all of the community feedback, our stakeholder group, our project team. All of those people kind of came together in various ways to contribute to this mood board. We did a lot of dot polling exercises, visual exercises that led to the selection of these images here. What we like to do with this mood board is it serves as an alignment point moving forward within the project. It serves as something we can always go back to as we move a little bit in the process, come back and check, are we still on this point? Does this align? Are we still on the right track? Again, it's that kind of North Star for the project moving forward. Another key component that was developed with this to aid in the wayfinding is this navigational storytelling. We really wanted to enhance the character of the district and lean into the stories that are already there. So utilizing these 3 key landmarks within the area help us in that effort. We're organizing the wayfinding system around these 3 components, the canal at the north, the water tower kind of in that middle area, and the railway to the south. These 3 points are very much landmarks. They're not meant to be various districts within, very much just a wayfinding device to be utilized when helping to navigate the district. We also chose these 3 because they have a very rich history. So there is a very rich history with the canal, there is one with the water tower, and with the railway. All 3 of those components help create the Heritage District as a whole. One part of this project that we really wanted to exemplify, amplify here is that the Heritage District is not just Gilbert Road between Vaughan and Page, right? The more robust where restaurants and activity are. It very much goes to Juniper, down past Elliott, and there is an east and west extension of that as well. So being able to utilize the entire district and tell all of those stories was something we really wanted to lean into with this package. So we created these series of textures or patterns that you'll start to see show up within the wayfinding to, again, aid in that navigation. So in the canal, looking at everything from water and bike trails to mobility, which you can start to see in those patterns. From the water tower, we're looking at everything from the agricultural history to those existing maybe line patterns that are happening within the area, that idea of socialization and gathering. And then in the railway, we're looking at the railroad itself, as well as its residential connection, as well as connecting between across the tracks, right? The Heritage District doesn't stop at the tracks, it continues. So how can we help encourage people to really know where that extends? All 3 of those areas led to the culmination of the Heritage District. So looking at the canal, the water tower, and the railway, creating those unique characteristics and patterns from the stories helped us lead into this primary navigational mark, which you see at the bottom of this slide, which exemplifies the Heritage District. It communicates clearly, first and foremost, that this is the Heritage District, with Gilbert as more of that secondary piece. Again, speaking to the aspect that this is a heritage district, while it may be a downtown, this is the unique part to this project, to this area. So you can really see how all 3 of those pieces together create the heritage district. It's not just one. That then led to the creation of a signage system. Knowing that one sign can't do it all, and knowing that we are addressing various challenges and concerns based out of the survey and the results in the intake session, we needed to create an entire family or system. So we have everything from vehicular to pedestrian to bicycle signs. all scales, all different sizes to, again, reinforce that destination. Some signs lead you to the destination, some reinforce, again, to help complement each other. In terms of materiality and flexibility, you will notice that we are leaning into more of a neutral palette to, again, complement the existing vibrancy of the area and not compete with it. We're using color in a really strategic way to help sign to those pinch points that people were identifying, like parking, bicycle parking, services, all of those pieces that people are having challenges finding is where we're utilizing our color to help direct them, while the rest of the system is a little bit more neutral to provide that really nice base for the entirety of the district. Because flexibility is important and we know that you will continue to grow, we needed to create something that is both flexible and modular. So there are various modules that kind of come together to create the content that can easily be changed out if content changes, things move location. Instead of replacing an entire sign, you're replacing a singular panel. Color choice was also important in that regard in terms of the wonderful sun we have here in Arizona and the heat, as to not have a difference in sun fading, making sure that if you change a panel in a year from now, it doesn't feel very different than the ones that maybe have been there for a year or two. Also looking at things that are tamper-proof and vandalism-friendly, non-friendly, I guess. Not having large white spaces, large open spaces, but having clear coatings that make it very easily to clean. They don't become very attractive to people to take with them or vandalize or take apart. Making sure that we're providing all of that infrastructure. Another component to this particular system was, again, that place marketing aspect. And we really feel like with the entire system, we're starting to achieve that, but especially with these banners. The banners are already an existing element in the area. They are single-sided in a way. They're only on the one side of the pole. We are looking at complementing that with a secondary piece, again, to not only reinforce that offset H of the brand by having them be offset, but also providing an infrastructure for you all for more place marketing. Right now, you utilize the Discover Gilbert ones quite often throughout the year. You have the veteran ones, you have holiday ones, all of that. So we're providing these two panels to not compromise the Heritage District component while also still providing that infrastructure for the more promotional place marketing pieces. They can also serve the function to kind of get people to find new things in the district, which you can see along the bottom there in that discovery section, utilizing public art snippets or destination photography to really help people see the vastness that is in the district itself. This is just a really quick snapshot at all of the signs, kind of in context. There is a picture of Gilbert Road kind of blurred in that background, just to give you a sense of the vibrancy we're talking about and how these signs will help complement and not compete with all of that. We want to keep the specialness that is there. This is showing how we are utilizing lighting. We are not thinking all of these signs are lit. We're looking at these two in particular, more of the larger directories that we're looking at placing near parking garages or parking lots, those moments where you kind of get where you're going, but you need to reorient yourself to get to your destination. And the smaller directory signs, which are more along your way, along the path. They serve more as a reinforcement. Also looking at color changing lights for the larger pieces that can manually be adjusted to either coordinate with the Hearn lights or the water tower or moments like that. It gives you that flexibility should you need it or want to utilize it. The small ones we're looking at just being more of a white light to, again, not compete with the lights in the area. Another large component of this is the gateway and arrival sign. Looking at historic images, there's that iconic Gilbert sign across the street. How can we start to create these more arrival moments within the district? This was a first round of study where we're looking at things that perhaps are in the median that stretches across the street, something that maybe goes across the entire street, looking at various placements, looking at the north and the south end of the district, perhaps in the center, perhaps all three, but a variety of scales. This was a second round of development where we're looking again at activating those areas. The placement of this is still very much in flux and very much a moving kind of target as we continue to design. We're also going to be developing this project in a phased kind of execution from a budgetary perspective, and the gateway will be slated more for a phase 2 rollout than a phase 1. Phase 1, we're really looking at satisfying the primary objectives or the primary concerns that came out of the survey, from getting people to the parking, getting people through the district and around and discovering those new things. Whereas phase 2 will be more so this place marketing effort, this additional layer of design on top. Project impact, like I said in the beginning, we're not looking at just trying to not reinforce the idea that the Heritage District is just a small strip in Gilbert Road, that it is the entirety of Juniper down to Elliott. It goes east and west. So you can see this project impact kind of diagram as to where we're looking at signs. Note, this does show all phases of development. It doesn't just show the phase 1, but shows all of the phases. And the system can continue to grow, again, as you grow both in the North Anchor, the South Anchor, and beyond. As far as next steps, we are looking at creating, we're working on drawings now and solidifying those location plans for the phase 1 pieces. There will be a guidelines document that will kind of show how to utilize all of the branding elements we've created, how those come to life, how those can be utilized, as well as a design intent document and drawing set. And that is what I have for you today. And I'll open it up if you have any comments or thoughts.
Thank you very much. Does anyone have any comments or thoughts? Vice Chairman Bianchi, please take the booth.
Thank you for the presentation. My first impression is I really like it. I think that you did a nice job combining the elements and the landmarks. I think it provides consistency throughout the district. My one question would be, how come we have that raised H rather than just a separate H? I know in one of the photos, one of the figures you kind of showed, there was looked like Gilbert and established date. Maybe that's why, but I'm just curious for the raised H.
Why the H is offset?
Yeah.
The offsetting of the H helps to amplify the connecting pieces that bridge together to create the system. So it's more of that active movement kind of aspect that we're looking for.
How the three elements
Yeah.
connect. Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Very well. Anyone else? Okay. I think it's great, too. I think, there's a lot of activity down there and that this is going to augment that well and to help to bring in some good interest in the area. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, then next, we have DR 23-120, Volterra Commercial EV Charging Facility, and Mr. Keith Newman.
There we go. Chair Munt, members of the commission, good evening. My only case on the study session agenda tonight is, as you stated, is for Volterra. The Volterra site is located off of Guadalupe. Oh, didn't see the word Guadalupe on that map at the bottom. It's located off of Guadalupe Road, and it's called Acacia Drive, which is actually about halfway between Cooper and McQueen off of Guadalupe. If you know where that big Dish Network satellite facility is, it's just a little bit west of that. And this is on lot number 18 of an existing industrial business park, the Fiesta Ranch Commerce Park. And this is one of the last remaining parcels that has yet to be developed in this park. So as far as the reason I have brought this to you before study session tonight is for two things: to get your input on the building elevations that have been proposed by the applicant at first review, and the applicant would like to move forward with construction documents at risk, and we would like to get your feedback on whether or not you feel that is appropriate at this time. So as far as the site is concerned, it's a fairly small site. It's about 0.72 acres, and as I stated earlier, it's located in the Fiesta Ranch Commerce Park on Lot 18. Zoned light industrial. The site has one access point off of Acacia Drive. And you come in off of Guadalupe Road, and as you can see on that site plan, you can turn right off of Acacia Drive into the site. And there is a controlled gate access point. And the site has, the basic use of this site is for electrical vehicle charging. There are 28 spaces for commercial electrical vehicles. My understanding is they are fleet vehicles, and the public will not have access to this facility. It's just for commercial fleet type of vehicles to come in here, charge their vehicles, and then they obviously they'll leave after they're charged. There is a operations building about 456 square feet, and it's kind of up there in that northwest corner of the site. It's kind of a little hard to see on the site plan. It's to the left of the entrance as you come in. And my understanding is that is a building for employees to, it has like a couple rooms in there for a break room and things like that, a place for employees to be able to just relax and do whatever they do on that site. I don't know what they do on the site, the employees, but it's for the employees. The applicant, obviously, in the future can provide a little more information on that, but that's all I know for now. Most of these spaces have canopies over the top of them, and there's a kind of 3 spaces in front of the building. There's one ADA space and a couple of spaces. Those will be where the employees park. I don't know exactly how many employees will be manning this facility at any given time. That's a question for the applicant. But the rest of the spaces, 28 spaces, will be for those fleet vehicles. There will be a block wall all the way around the site that will be able to screen this site from adjacent properties and landowners. Just a little bit of landscaping will be on the inside. I'll show you the site plan. There's about 22% of landscaping, and this is obviously the more colorful version of the landscape plan. The majority of the landscaping will be on the outside of the perimeter walls along the right-of-ways and along Princeton Court and Acacia Drive, and of course along Guadalupe Road. As you've probably driven out there to see the property, there is existing landscaping along Guadalupe Road. They're not disturbing any of that landscaping except for one tree. They're going to be removing one tree, one of those tall pine trees, and then planting a new one. And that pine tree is being relocated, or if you will, due to the fact that they needed to move it to construct their block wall, one of the screening walls along Guadalupe. Here's the elevations and the floor plan on the same sheet for you. What the applicant is proposing now is and this is one of the things I wanted your feedback on tonight, is they're proposing now it's a prefabricated building that is fairly basic in design. A couple awnings in the front. You can see that it's boxy, of course. Not a lot of vertical or horizontal movement on the building. So a pretty plain, basic type of building. So through the first review, staff has made comments on this building that concerning our design guidelines, that currently, right now, it does not meet the design guidelines. And so we've raised those concerns that a temporary looking style prefabricated building does not align with our employment design guidelines, as these design guidelines require that the design of the building the building look more like a permanent structure. We would prefer a site-built building, and that the building aligns with the character of the buildings that are in the surrounding area within the Fiesta Ranch Commerce Park. Despite the small size of the building, we feel that there are still some opportunities to be able to provide the articulation and movement or some of those elements that you see on some of the buildings in the area. We understand it's a small building and that you're kind of limited on what you can do to a certain extent. But if I showed you some of these buildings in the area, there's some of these elements they may be able to incorporate on this building even though it is small. So you can see this is a building right next door to the west that has varying parapet wall heights. They have movement, horizontal movement in the wall planes and some different materials and awnings and glass and things like that. So we're not saying it has to match the buildings around it. We just want it to better complement them. And here's another building across the street. This one's a little harder to see because I was only able to get a street view look at it. So you can kind of see what kind of buildings are in this area. Some of them are warehouses. There's not a lot of office. That's why this one is the most comparable, because it is an office building to the west. We have already had a meeting with the applicant to discuss the elevations, and they have shown me a conceptual elevation of a kind of in the direction that they're going. I haven't had a chance to really analyze it or look at it yet, but I just wanted to let you know that the applicant is striving to improve the building as we speak. So we're working with them on that. So I just wanted to get your input. So that's the site plan at the end. I always like to put that at the end, right before I open it up for questions. So that is it. There's my 2 items of input, and that concludes my presentation. And I would love any feedback that you can provide me on the elevations, and also if you're okay with the applicant moving forward with construction documents at risk. Thank you.
Thank you, Keith.
You're welcome.
Anybody have any comments or questions? Commissioner Anderson.
Keith, thank you for the presentation. Regarding the building, I'm kind of okay. Like, I understand the size of it, the use. I mean, it's not a really highly occupiable site. So I'm okay with the building the way it is, but if you're already working with the applicant to address it, I'm interested to see what they can do to the building to kind of fit more in line with the LDC. The question I have for you is, if you could go to the colored site plan, the trash enclosure, that's kind of in a weird location, pointing in a different direction. So if a refuse truck comes in, I'm assuming that's a gate that's spanning across a vehicular gate, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, so they're blocked off by a vehicular gate. So in order for them to service that container, they have to hit the keypad, get into the site, loop around to face the container, pick it up, and then leave. So what's your thoughts on the location and position of that refuse enclosure? Do you think that's adequate?
Chair Munt, Commissioner Anderson, that is kind of something that we're still trying to work on with our sanitation department. We're trying to get them to, the applicant, while they were designing the site, contacted our sanitation department to find out where it would be appropriate to place it. And I think this was one of the initial sites that was mentioned. But as we've gotten into the design, we're kind of finding out that it may not be the best location. So we are actively trying to, or the applicant is actively trying to work with our sanitation department to potentially come up with another location, or even find out whether or not it's even needed, since it's such a small building and they're not going to be generating a lot of trash. So we're still kind of working through that with our sanitation department.
Okay, all right. And then in terms of the, CDs at risk, I mean, it's their risk to take if they feel like, you guys okay them, if they feel like they do it, and then when it comes back before us for approval, I know if nobody feels comfortable with the building, then it's up to them, what happens from there. So it's their risk to take if they want to do it. So thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Commissioner Simon.
Thank you, Chair. Keith, just really quick for clarification purposes, out of curiosity, you said this is a corporate refueling or charging station. Is it specific to a specific corporation, or is this, they're going to be leasing spaces to corporations in general to be able to come in and charge?
Chair Munt, Commissioner Simon, I'm not exactly sure. The applicant's here and they can answer that question if you would like them to. I believe it's just for commercial fleet vehicles. I don't know if it's for specific companies, but the applicant can answer that question if you deem it necessary.
I don't know that it's necessary. It's just out of curiosity. It's just conceptually seems odd.
I'm not exactly sure.
With regards to the building and to your comments, I would agree with Commissioner Anderson. I didn't have an issue with the building at all. It's basically in a compound. It's not going to be seen. It's behind the trees in an enclosure, basically. So I don't know, but if the applicant's working with you on it, I would say proceed forward and try to get what you're looking for. I don't know that it necessarily has to be a site built in my mind because of what it is. I mean, modular is fine. If we need to dress it up a little bit, fine. With regards to the refuge, I had the same question with regards to refuge. Otherwise, I don't have an issue with the CDs at risk at this point, so.
Okay.
Thank you, Commissioner Simon. Commissioner Everett, I saw your hand.
Kind of along the same lines, as far as the vehicles, I just want to get clarification on what capacity they're expecting to be at. Are they expecting it to be completely full? What's the size? Are the spaces big enough at this point? And then, if it's full, are they going to have people waiting, and where would they wait? Questions like that. But I'd be, I would say, along with everybody else, that moving ahead with CDs at risk is okay for me.
Okay.
Thank you. Commissioner Gage, please take it away.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to try not to repeat what they said about the building. It's fine to me. I would just wonder if we can have them move those 2 air conditioners down, because I thought it was like an 11-foot tall building with a 6-foot tall wall, and those 2 air conditioners are at the top, and we make everybody else screen that stuff. So if there's a way to move those down, that would be nice. But I can't imagine that this building is actually going to have employees in it very often. So, yeah, I'm fine with it.
Thank you. Yes, Commissioner Fay.
Thank you. To me, CDs at risk do require a degree of, you've got to be in the ballpark, and I think they are. That it's close enough. They don't get a carte blanche because it's their risk, but all right, I have no problem with the CDs at risk in general. The statement that this building is just for the employees doesn't strike me as terribly credible, given, my guess is just, I took it at face value when you said it. Now, looking at it, 2 break rooms and 2 bathrooms and a storage just for an employee who's waiting around for, my guess is, a buddy of mine who's got an electric car, it takes some time to charge. My guess is this is more like a waiting room where people who are charging are going to hang out. I don't know if that changes any of that essentially it's customers hanging out. Does that change any of the classifications or anything? But in terms of the building itself, it's kind of a semi-industrial area, semi-industrial use. I don't know that aesthetically it makes any big difference to me.
Chairman, if I may, as far as, and Commissioner Fay, as far as the use of the building is concerned, we can provide more information on that for when it comes back to you for final consideration. So I'll definitely try and get that information from the applicant, and then we can find out whether or not those rooms are used as break rooms, as offices, or whether or not the people who are charging the vehicles are going in there to hang out, go to a vending machine. We can get more information on that. So I'll make sure that happens.
Thank you. Vice Chairman Bianchi.
So Keith, I guess my only question was, does the industrial park have a property owners association that controls any of the landscaping, color palettes, or any other factor of design, or are we just deferring to the town's guidelines for industrial?
Chairman, Vice Chair Bianchi, I don't know the answer to that question. I'm going to have to research that and find out.
Okay.
But as of,
I didn't know if the industrial park would have any say in that as far as how the design of the building goes or anything like that.
Yeah, that's a very good question, and I'm going to have to do some digging on that and provide more information when we come back for public hearing.
Okay.
But as of right now, all the landscaping along the street frontages is we're requiring them to meet code LDC standards. But I can find out more about whether or not there's an association and whether or not they have specific standards and whether or not they are weighing in on not only the design, but the types of plant materials and things like that. So I can find out more about that.
Okay. As far as what the feedback with the other commissioners, I would echo that as well. I mean, the top of the building between the perimeter wall and the landscaping, we're probably just going to see the top from the street. So if the applicant's working with you on any additional detail, maybe towards the top is the best place to put it. But other than that, I don't have a huge issue. And same thing with the CD at risks. I'm fine with that. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chairman. Well, Keith, my first question is, do you know what level these chargers are? Is it a level 3?
Chair Munt, I have no idea. I'm going to have to get back with you on that.
I would imagine it's a level 3, which would mean you could charge them within a shorter period of time. If it's level 2, you'll need up like 8 hours. And so if the idea here is that people will be able to come in and they're level 3 chargers, then you're probably going to have 30 to 40 minutes, dependent on the size of the fleet vehicles and/or fleet that you're utilizing. And in that case, I think I would echo that this is going to be a break room-esque area with bathrooms, which I think is prudent. We don't need people in the bushes, even though there's a beautiful 22% landscaping there that Ralph Pugh has added. But I just think that, you know, it is going to be something where either people are dropping a car off and then they're going to have a shuttle service, because otherwise, how else, or you're going to sit there for a while and then you're going to leave. So I would just be sure to check on that, because you don't have any other parking outside of the electric slots. But other than that, the area it's in is great. It's a very much needed thing in the area, and I think that it fits well in the building. I'd say just keep working on what you're working on, but I'm pretty cool too.
Chair Munt, thank you very much for those comments. This is the first facility like this of its kind in the town of Gilbert. So it's very unfamiliar to us as town staff, and we're learning about this type of facility as we go as well. So obviously, based on some of the comments and questions tonight, we have some additional information that we need to track down, and we will do that, and we will make sure that the final report addresses all of that information and answers your questions. So we appreciate everybody's comments and feedback.
Very good. All right. Thank you, Keith.
Thank you.
Okay. I believe that was the last on our study session agenda, so we'll move on to number 3 to discuss the regular meeting agenda. So right now, we have a consent with the Panda Express on it, and then non-consent has 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12 being the text amendments. Does anyone have anything that they need to have moved off of consent, or anything that they think could be moved on?
Can we move the continuance of 9 and 10 to consent?
I think we can. That's not, okay, yeah. So 9 and 10 can move, right?
Chairman, would anybody have objections if we moved items 8 and 12 to consent? Unless people have anything, some feedback on 8?
That lines up exactly with what, that leaves on just 11.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And that's kind of where my mind was at, too. So unless somebody in the public, is anyone here to speak on number 8 or 12? Okay. Well, that sounds like, if that's cool with Eva, okay.
Yes, we are unaware of anybody wanting those
Okay.
heard.
There's no, very well then. Okay, that sounds good. Then with that, we will adjourn the study session, and we'll see everybody back in about 15 minutes. Thank you. Okay, everyone. I believe everyone's ready, so we will call the regular meeting to order, and the first order of business will be the Pledge of Allegiance. All right, could we get a roll call, please?
Commissioner Everett,
Present?
Commissioner DeGravina. Present. Commissioner Simon,
Here.
Commissioner Gage,
Here.
Commissioner Fay,
Present.
Commissioner Davis, Commissioner Anderson,
Yeah.
Vice Chairman Bianchi,
Present.
Chairman Munt.
Here.
We have a quorum.
Very well, thank you. Now I'd like to move on to entertaining the approval of last month's agenda. If anyone has anything they'd like to say, or else a motion.
Last month's agenda?
Approval of tonight's.
I did it again. All right. Yeah, I did that last month. I wanted to approve my moves of last month, just to see if you guys caught it. Thank you. I'd like to move on to approval of tonight's agenda, if we could, please.
Okay. Chairman, I would propose that we keep item 7, DR 22-85, and move items 8, 9, 10, and 12 to the consent agenda this evening.
Okay, we have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Commissioner Simon seconds. So the motion is to keep number 7 on the consent and move 8, 9, 10, and 12. Everyone cast your vote. Unanimous approval. Okay. Moving on to communications. At this time, we'll do communications from citizens. So members of the public may comment on matters within the jurisdiction of the town, but not on the agenda, and the commission's response is limited to responding to criticism, asking staff to review a matter commented upon, or asking the matter to be put on a future agenda. I don't have any cards. Is there anyone in the public that wishes to speak on a matter not on the agenda? Not seeing anyone. We will move on to a report from Council Liaison on current events. Councilmember Anderson.
Nothing specific, Mr. Chairman, except happy holidays to everybody.
Yeah, thank you very much. Happy holidays to you as well. Okay. Now we'll go into the public hearing consent. All items listed below are considered the public hearing consent calendar. The commission may, by a single motion, approve any number of items where, after opening the public hearing, no person requests the item to be removed from the consent calendar. If such a request is made, the commission shall then withdraw the item from the public hearing consent calendar for the purpose of public discussion and separate action. Other items on the agenda may be added, such as we did tonight. So with that being said, I don't have any comment cards. Is there anyone who would like to speak on any of the items that have been moved or were on the consent agenda? Seeing no one, I will then entertain a motion if there is one.
Chair, I'll make a motion. I'd like to make a motion to approve the consent item agenda, which includes item 7, the continuance of items 9 and 10, consent to approve item 8 and 12.
Okay, do I have a second?
I'll second it.
Commissioner Fay with the second. Any discussion? All right, we'll move to a vote. Please vote. Consent agenda has passed 7-0 unanimous. We'll now move on to the non-consent. Non-consent public hearing items will be heard at an individual public hearing and will be acted upon by the commission by a separate motion during the public hearings. Anyone wishing to speak or comment in support or opposition to the public hearing item may do so. If you wish to comment on a public hearing item, you must fill out a public comment form indicating the item number on which you wish to be heard. Once the hearing is closed, there will be no further public comment unless requested by a member of this commission. I do not have any comment cards, so if there's anyone that would like to speak, I'd encourage you to go get a card. Not seeing anyone. I will then move on to opening it up to the one item left, number 11, Z23-06 LDC text amendment for Ms. Ashley McDonald.
Thank you, Chairman and Commission. This is our LDC text amendment for the parking code refresh and update. I went through some of this last month as a study session, but I will cover some of the history again. If you remember back in 2021, when we updated our land development code, we left out the parking section in order to engage a consultant who would look at our parking and identify some best practices that we could implement and improve that section of the code. So we did initiate a contract with Walker Consultants in 2022 in order to begin that process, and they provided us a recommendations plan of changes that we can consider. I shared with you last month that we pared down that recommendations report to just a couple of items that we felt were most important to move forward and in order to allow development to continue within the town in a couple of areas that we've seen continuous requests for parking changes. So in 2023, June of this year, Planning Commission did initiate a text amendment. Through that Walker report, we got some feedback on what we could improve in our code, but essentially what we sought from Walker Consultants was to provide us information on how we can update our code, how we can remove any parking barriers, be innovative in our approach and take into account new technologies that might be entering this space, provide some tools for development opportunities and for staff, and then how we might be able to streamline our review process. So through that effort, Walker Consultants identified a number of items that we could address that included our parking ratios and parking requirements, design standards for off-street parking, opportunities for parking relief, parking standards for new mode types, so rideshare and EV, and then parking ordinance reorganization. So as we looked at the report from Walker Consultants, we identified a couple of items that we wanted to be part of our phase one of this parking update, and then a couple of items that we wanted to take some more time to study. And so what we're bringing forward tonight is what we're calling phase one of this parking update, and that is providing some opportunities for parking relief, as well as some reorganization of the parking code related to the new language that we will be adding. So staff will continue to study some of the other items and bring those forward at a future time as we have more information. So parking reductions, recommended actions from that report is to create parking reduction for mixed-use developments with administrative approval. So we talked about that language last month at study session, and you've seen it in the red line draft of the code that was provided as part of your staff report. And then it was also recommended that we adopt a more extensive parking reduction option. And so, again, you've seen that in the draft language where we've provided some additional options for relief with a range of approval types depending on the percentage of reduction requested. Existing tools in our land development code include shared parking reductions. So where uses have different peak hours, we can offer a reduction currently up to 50% with submittal of a study that shows how uses operate at different peak times. We also have a deferred parking option that currently exists in our code, which allows for a deferral of up to 50% of parking. The deferral option does not reduce a parking requirement, but it does allow them to defer installation of all required parking until such time that it's needed. So they still have to have the space for it. So the benefits of this is a little bit more limited than the shared parking option. And then we also have a parking reduction tool within our code where there is a building that's got unique design or a unique use. We can allow up to 25% of reduced parking. And the example that we typically use is a medical office building that uses a large CAT scan machine, for example. It requires a lot of space, but occupancy of that portion of the building is really small. So those are some of the tools that we have today in our code. And so what we're proposing is to offer parking reductions that's a little bit more broad in scope. It allows some more opportunity for us to provide relief to different uses than our current shared parking, parking deferral, and unique building design options. So with this, we've got 3 different relief options. There's the administrative relief, which would allow reductions between 1 and 10%. 10% is consistent with the rest of the code in areas that we allow administrative relief. We also have reductions from 10 to 25% through an administrative use permit. Again, staff feels as though this is fairly consistent with our existing practices, as I described in our previous slide of the tools that we currently have available. And then we also are adding in reductions from 25% and up to 50% could be done through a conditional use permit, which would go to Planning Commission for review. The Walker study also indicated that we should consider adding administrative reduction option for mixed-use projects. Earlier in the year, the Planning Commission approved mixed-use zoning districts for 3 different categories, and so we wanted to add in an opportunity for those to receive reduction in parking through the design review process to streamline that, because the intent of that code language is that there is shared parking, shared use amongst the site, good pedestrian connectivity, and so we think it makes sense for them to have a streamlined process for parking reductions in those scenarios. There is also the this is very similar to what was presented previously, parking reductions for unique and special circumstances. And then the code also outlines parking study requirements. Minor parking studies would require a base parking ratio for the uses, a mode split reduction for each use. So how many people might be arriving by various means of transportation, whether it's rideshare, bus, captive reduction. So, evaluating those that might be on site for shared trips, presence factor for each use, and a description of the methodology used for developing these factors. And then we've also got requirements for the major parking study. The major parking study is required where a conditional use permit is required through that process, so the higher reduction percentage. And what's different about this to the minor parking study is that we add in the requirement for parking inventory and occupancy counts for 3 comparable properties. And then staff would review those comparable properties before they conduct their complete report. And so that's explained here. We also had a recommendation from Walker to reorganize some of the code and to consolidate some of the parking reductions to simplify staff review. We've also, through that effort and through that recommendation, considered reorganization of the code. So we've proposed a deletion of the parking reduction and deferral sections from 5.33, renumbered that section, and then moved those items that were deleted into a new parking deferrals and reductions section. In order to create space for that new parking reductions and deferrals section, we consolidated 2 other sections related to residential parking. So I mentioned to you last month you might see a little bit more red in that red line version, and that's really because we took some sections and moved them from one area of the code to another. We also identified through the review a number of Scrivener's errors, so you'll see some additional red lines in the copy of the parking section just related to those errors. Staff did have an additional request that wasn't provided to you in the staff report, and that is to add the following language to a couple of sections within the code. It's 5.3.4A and 5.3.4B. This is the parking reduction section and shared parking section, that any parking reduction approval shall terminate if the use or uses change. That language did exist in the shared parking in the deferral section, but doesn't exist in the other 2, so we want to make sure that we're duplicating that language. With that, staff does recommend approval of this text amendment. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have and receive any feedback that you might have.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Ashley. Does anyone have any comments, questions, or feedback? Commissioner Simon.
Ashley, thank you for your presentation. Can you go back one slide? Which says any parking reduction approval shall terminate if the use or uses change. Is that for existing structures or new development?
So if a development is to receive approval of a parking reduction, whether it's through the admin relief, the administrative use permit, or a conditional use permit, that would terminate if they change their uses, which means they would have to come back to us for us to reevaluate whether or not we can still offer a parking reduction. And we've had some internal conversations because last month at study session, the question came up, well, what happens if the uses do change? And so I think, by adding this in, we're kind of putting them on notice that this won't carry forward. And so they will have to, the landlord's property owners will have to manage who their tenants are and make sure that they're still in conformance with what that original approval is, or they have to come back to us so that we can reevaluate that.
Okay, thank you.
Vice Chairman Bianchi.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, Ashley, I do have a couple questions for you. So would a Prop 207 waiver, would that still protect the town if the parking reductions were required or requested, but if they weren't granted at any of the 3 levels? Would that cover us for what you require through any zoning application?
I'm looking at Elena. I think she's unmuting.
Chairman, Commissioner Bianchi, I did hear your question. I believe that you posed it to staff earlier this week. And I've taken a look at it, and there's a section of code that requires that a waiver be submitted along with any application for a use permit, which covers all of our shared parking deferrals under existing code. I do have a question under this draft if, under the first scenario, if it's not an administrative use permit, it doesn't look like the waiver would be required. So that's something I would just definitely want to look at before town council. And I was hoping that maybe we could amend the recommendation to include maybe just an examination of that issue as well for town council.
Okay. Yeah, that would definitely be acceptable. And then also, Ashley, again, so is there an appeal process if any of these 3% of reductions were denied? So perhaps if council or adjacent users took issue with the requested reduction?
Yeah, Chairman Munt and Vice Chair Bianchi, there is an appeal process for these applications. The administrative applications are appealable to Planning Commission, and the conditional use permit is appealable to council.
Okay. And then, so what you've presented tonight, does this pretty much follow the recommendations from Walker Consultants, or did the town add any additional?
It does largely follow the recommendations from Walker. They obviously had quite a few more recommendations that we elected not to proceed with at this time for further study, but this is fairly consistent with what they recommended and the best practices that they saw in comparable cities.
Okay. But the others you're gonna wait and evaluate?
Correct,
Okay.
yeah.
And then I guess the last question, under parking reductions, I think you started to answer this. Who or how do you determine what use has that unique parking demand? Is that kind of at staff's discretion when you kind of meet with the applicant on the proposal?
Chairman and Vice Chair, that's correct, and it is up to the applicant to provide us evidence that they are unique in some way through their narrative and application. We do have conversations with them typically before they submit and provide information on whether or not we think it's something that they would have a good case for. But they provide us that information, and then their parking study will evaluate and hopefully provide us the data to support their argument.
Okay. Yeah, I guess that would be my one concern through all this is how as a town do we get strategic or specific as to who or what conditions kind of can request that reduction? Because I can see anybody coming in and asking for a 2 or 5% reduction and just shave a little money off the cost and just say, oh, I'm just going to request it. So I think that's my concern, but if you guys can use that discretion and go from there, and what you had shown about the termination of uses, it can revert back, that gives me a little more assurance. Okay, thanks, Ashley. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Anyone else? Commissioner Fay.
So Ashley, it's kind of coming off what Commissioner Bianchi said, but I've dealt with a lot of these, and this is an area that's rife with abuse. I don't know if you remember the expansion of downtown, the new heritage stuff north of the canal, and I went at that pretty hard because I called baloney on a ton of their shared use. I know one traffic engineering firm that seems to just specialize in papering the baloney file as far as I'm concerned. So I view these very skeptically. The traffic, the reductions, the parking reductions, and even the shared. I'm sorry, I see it all the time. It's an area to cut cost. And frankly, once a developer puts it in, sells, and moves on, if we end up with a parking mess, it's not his problem to clean up. So I'm very skeptical of the entire concept. I'm skeptical of the numbers. 25 and 50% are pretty high numbers. It's an area it's one of the few areas I'm not supportive of there being a lot of flexibility. I expect there to be pretty significant hurdles to overcome parking reductions, and because I've just seen it abused my entire career. It's such an easy, low-hanging fruit to abuse. One of the two areas that I have, and I have no faith, I get what you're saying, that if the use changes, the agreement shall expire. I don't think there's a chance in the world that's going to happen. I have no doubt that they'll negotiate something different or finagle out of it. The idea that if we put in a mixed use or something and the mixed use somehow, the use gets somehow sabotaged 10 years down the road, that somehow we're going to pull someone's operating permit or somehow unentitle something or invoke something. Yeah, maybe if in the latter part of the entitlement process, while they're still developing, if things fall apart, maybe that would happen, but down the road, it's just not going to happen. I tried to do it with a school that was just flagrantly thumbing their nose, and it was a it was a school, which is sympathetic, but I don't think it's going to work. The place I have, so that's kind of me just ranting. The place I have questions, I've dealt a lot with shared and reduced parking requirements. I've never dealt with deferred. And I tried to do a little bit of research, and there isn't much. I'm just taking it based on what you said. It lines up with what little research I could find based on the definitions of the word. This is going to be, we're not going to require them to put in the parking, but we are going to require them to save the space where the parking would go, which is, they can't just leave it dirt. So essentially, we're going to say, we're going to defer 20% of the parking, but we're going to require you to increase the size of your landscaping because that's where the parking is going to go if the deferred doesn't work out?
Chairman and Commissioner, that's existing language in our code, and that is how we have utilized that provision. I can think of one example. There's a medical office building that utilized that, and they've got surface retention basins. And so they demonstrated to us through the design review process that should they need that parking or should users change, that they could accommodate that if they undergrounded their retention and then created surface parking. So it isn't that helpful of a tool because you still have to have the space available, which is oftentimes what folks are trying to achieve is to have more land available. So it is a tool in our code. It's not used often because it poses its own challenges, but that is the idea.
Is there an incident you're ever familiar with where a city or a jurisdiction has invoked nope, this isn't working, we want the parking?
My only experience with that provision is here in Gilbert, and in my time here, we have not, no.
It doesn't sound common, so
Yeah.
It's not surprising you don't have a big enough sample size. And if I read, other than the potential carve-out for mixed use, none of this is necessarily limited to commercial, multifamily. It seems to spread across these potential to do the reductions don't seem to be limited by the type of use either, as I read this, correct?
That is correct.
Because I could see, particularly in some of the industrial, you've got a warehouse, you've got a automated, an autonomous vehicle station that's going to have one dude. I mean, you're right, you might have some industrial, but where we tend to have a lot of problems and where I would expect the most aggressive moving is either mixed use or multifamily. I'd be surprised to see that kind of stuff. And if we vote for this, then this will be sailing out and we will be, I don't know, I'm surprised you guys want this flexibility because you guys are going to be on ground zero of this and not allowing us to buffer you or buffer council.
Chairman and Commission, we didn't differentiate between different users who could use this tool, but we do anticipate we will have a pretty strict test that needs to be met for a variety of users. But it was not contemplated that we break it out and say this isn't an option for different use types, meaning multifamily. But I think we've held pretty firm to parking requirements being met for multifamily development, and I think we would hold that the same. But to your point, I think the warehouse users, storage facility users, perhaps depending on their model, medical office is one that we most consistently see requesting parking reductions. Those are the ones that we get the most requests for. But I think we would have some honest conversations with applicants, especially of certain use types, if they were proposing a really large reduction.
My opinion is our multifamily parking requirements are inadequate now. And I gave in on something like this in an administrative code years ago. And in fact, part of the argument in front of council was Bill Fay knows what he's doing and he's tough, he can handle us, which may have been playing to my flattery and stuff. But then the result was afterwards, I had to be tough and was fighting these things every freaking time. So I'm concerned by that right now, particularly if you factor in, as I kind of yelled at Keith that one time, sorry, if you factor in some of the street parking and stuff, I already think our multifamily is inadequate. I mean, we see it all over the place. So I'm concerned by those factors. So, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Anyone else want to follow that up? Okay, so I guess it's me. Well, looking at this, I of course also as an engineer have concerns about parking reductions. I know that we talked about this in the study session, I believe, and we had some concerns about the 50% because that does seem extremely exorbitant but at the same time, I trust that the staff is prepared to put together a test to say, no, you're not going to make it. I just wanted to, do you have any indication of what that test would be?
Commissioner or Chairman Munt and Commission, we would require them to submit, of course, those parking studies. The reductions from 25% up to 50% do require that major parking study report, which includes evaluation of similar sites. So we can compare parking counts at sites that they have determined to be most similar. Then staff has an approval of those sites before they can move forward with their parking study to make sure that we're in agreement that those sites are comparable to the ones that they're proposing. And then we would evaluate the data that they submit. One of the things that we also considered is that our current code does allow up to 50% reductions in a number of scenarios. And so that was why that cap made sense for us. But I would also share that where there are uses or infill sites that are small, where the parking requirement is very small to begin with, they're naturally going to have a higher percentage reduction. And so we wanted to provide some opportunity, especially as we approach build out and having those smaller infill sites, wanted to have a tool available for them to be able to see an actual impact from the possible reduction.
Yeah, and I think that makes sense for someone that has a requirement of 6 sites, and if they want to drop 1 or 2, then you get to a higher percentage pretty quick. The other question went along with, has anybody ever done a deferred parking and changed that? Do we have what is the actual mechanism that would trigger that? Like, is it people call up the code enforcement and say, hey, bro, there's a bunch of cars over here?
I think that could play into it. Having not had that experience, I imagine we would have some internal conversation about when we can ask them to make those improvements. But I think if we were receiving a number of calls that they're parking on dirt or they're parking on adjacent properties, we would then have an opportunity to start that conversation of, does it make sense for you to build the rest of your parking?
Okay. Yeah, because in some cases, I think this is good. I think that, like we talked about autonomous vehicles and all of the ride sharing and, so in some cases, but I also think that we just had approved that mixed use to have the commercial below and multifamily above, and that then the street parking, there is going to be some, but I'll leave that to staff. You guys do a good job at that, so just keep that up. But other than that, I recognize that it's trying to update the code, and I think you did a pretty good job, so. Yeah, Commissioner Anderson.
So, correct me if I'm wrong, I think on one of the slides for the if somebody wanted to request 50% reduction, right? So they have to go, they submit the application to staff goes through it. That's a use permit, you guys are making it, right?
That is correct.
All right, so if that's a use permit, that means at some point for an approval, it has to come before the commission, right?
Correct.
And if it gets approved, they get their 50%. So I feel comfortable with that, because that gives us a layer of security. Say if a multifamily guy comes here asking for 50%, I mean, we just stop it and say, no, you're not getting 50%. If you want a reduction, you're more realistic. So I think that should make you feel a little bit more comfortable that we do have a final say once we get into that top bracket of reduction.
And that's the 20, above 25 then? That would, okay.
That's, yeah. The big
Yeah. Well, I think that people will be very wary if they read the public record of Commissioner Fay's comments before they would try that, so. Anyone else? Yes, Commissioner Everett.
So if they have the deferred parking, are we accounting for that in the grading and drainage as well? Because all of a sudden you have less permeable surface when you increase the parking, and are we able to accommodate the stormwater from that? I don't know, is that something that's considered in deferred parking development?
So Chairman and Commission, what would happen is if the applicant, so what they've done in the past is they've shown us a site plan that demonstrated that they could provide all parking on their site. If they were to then come and develop the rest of that parking, we would request from them revised plans that showed, the parking again, grading and drainage, making sure that they're meeting all of those requirements. So staff would review that prior to them just going out and adding those additional stalls to ensure that they're still meeting all of the requirements.
All right, thank you. Anyone else? Oh, yes, Vice Chairman.
So Ashley, I think some cities have probably looked at getting rid of parking requirements altogether, but my understanding is that's in much denser population centers. I don't think, would we estimate if staff looked at that Gilbert is not at that density or pedestrian or close or mass transit or anything like that?
Yeah, Chairman and Commission, we have not evaluated that. I was actually just reading an article a couple of weeks ago about a city in Texas that got rid of their parking requirements. And I think those are in places where they've got better access to transit and different, mode or different types of transportation than we do here. And so we have not contemplated that at all.
Okay. And can you tell me a little more about, if you did the 10 to 25%, what the administrative use permit process looks like?
Yeah, so the administrative use permit process, the applicant submits that application to staff. We route it to our typical review department. It'll include engineering and our traffic review. And then there is a public notification component of that. So we require the applicant to notice property owners within 300 feet, HOAs within 1,000 feet of the request. And then we set a period of time where they can provide comments to staff. Once that comment period has closed, staff will evaluate any feedback that we heard along with the submittal that was made and then issue our decision. That is appealable, as I mentioned, to council. So if we did receive any feedback from the public that was opposed to the request and say staff approved it anyhow, we would notify those people and then they would have an opportunity to appeal the decision.
Okay, thank you. guess my question to the other commissioners would be, are we comfortable at that 1 to 10% having staff's discretion, or does that give anybody concern, or would you want the administrative use permit to apply to a larger percentage, or are you comfortable with the percentages that have been called out, I guess is my question. I suppose we can discuss that if you close the public hearing.
I suppose I could. Well, to close the public hearing, we could do that now then. There's nobody that would like to speak on this, correct? I don't have any cards. Okay, with that then, I will close the public hearing, and I'll bring it up to the dais for discussion. And I believe Vice Chairman has prompted our discussion to, do we have any issue with that lower thresholds, or do we want to try to verbiate some requirements? I don't know if that's a word, apologies. Anyone have any comments on that? Yeah, I certainly did.
Somebody look that up.
It's the text language.
So I will, yeah, Commissioner Bianchi just kind of nailed, right? And it's not, Commissioner Anderson hit why I'm not concerned about the big one, because the CUP has to come through here anyway. And it's not even, the lower ones, particularly at industrial or even commercial, most commercial, again, except for the Heritage District, don't really concern me, because that is where we probably should have some discretion. The one that right now seems wrapped up for me is that, like I said, I already think the multifamily or those like zero lot individual townhome type configurations are already inadequate, and we're turfing some discretion to lower it around the edges, an area that I think will be abused. And this is a double kind of whammy in my mind, because one, it's already kind of messed up for the citizens, and two, 10 years from now when the developer's gone, the HOA's fighting, the Facebook pages pop up that say Schmuckatelli Acres parking sucks, and they've got and then they're calling the police, and then they're coming to council to speak at the public, to speak at the podium about how council has to do something about parking in our neighborhood. And council legitimately was like, the ship sailed 10 years ago. And so I'm trying to head off those problems now. And that where Commissioner Bianchi highlighted, the lower threshold, and specifically lower threshold in the multifamily, that's the part that kind of stops me.
And I would echo that, Commissioner Fay, because I think as we move towards additional infill versus green space development, the request for, this is going to accelerate as it's, the size of the lots get smaller, and, certain multifamily, I don't know if there's some language that we could suggest, but if anybody has anything from legalese that we could do, I would be in favor of putting something to halt that, or some further restrictions, because I agree that the multifamily, it does get squeezed quite a bit already. And, along just parking, that green space and everything else, so. Commissioner Simon?
Would it be fair then just to do a stipulation with the motion to stipulate that lower threshold does not pertain to multifamily residential? What, what's that? I don't know. That's what I'm asking.
I don't think that works.
That's the question, is with it being a code, do we have any ability?
The answer is have them draft
Well,
something.
I guess what I'm saying is, can we put a okay, yeah, so we're not stipulating, but I guess move to approve with regards to adding maybe verbiage that would remove multifamily out of that lower bracket. Does that make sense what I'm trying to say?
Are we approving, or are we recommending approval to?
We're recommending
Council.
to council.
Yeah.
We're not approving.
So I think all we could probably really do is we could just recommend any modifications, and then it's going to be up to council at the end of the day whether or not they agree or
Accept
not.
that
Yeah.
And
recommendation.
along with that, the new mixed use and things would be another one. You have any multifamily, because I can see it being, oh no, well, this is not just multifamily, so we're okay.
Ask a question to Commissioner Fay. Commissioner Fay, is it really just the multifamily you have concerns with and not the commercial or industrial or?
Certainly not industrial. I don't see any of the big headaches I'm talking about in industrial. I don't off the top of my head, it's not apparent enough to me in commercial that we're having a problem with it. Again, with maybe a weird exception for the Heritage District, but that's not really addressed here, so let's kind of put that aside. I guess it is multifamily or some of those crowded zero townhome type developments, PUD type stuff. But I don't know about the idea of we'll recommend approval with a recommended change. I don't know if that necessarily flies. Would our idea be to recommend staff make a change? And we'll make a recommendation based on the change. Is that really what we're hanging? Or is it literally we recommend approval to council if staff agrees to that?
Yeah,
It
you're
seems a
right, 'cause
little
I don't know
awkward.
that there wouldn't be time to actually make.
Chairman.
Yes.
I try to avoid doing these discussions on the dais, but I guess I share the concerns that Commissioner Fay did. As I'm wondering, just thinking out loud here, is if we did proposed reductions like 1 to 10%, maybe that was administrative use permit, and anything 10 to 50 comes back as a conditional use permit before us. I think that way it adds a little more oomph before they start requesting those reductions. And if we kind of have a trial period, rather than going, I do like the tiered system, I think there's some value to that, but I don't want to make it overly burdensome to administrate. But I'm wondering if they were to request that, if you make it a little more cumbersome, maybe they're a little less apt to ask for those reductions. And then I understand that I had initial concerns on the use permit because we have to still meet the findings of fact. I'm comfortable with that. But, usually we always talk about the use permit is you can always pull it back if it gets out of hand. But you're right, after the property's developed, we can't do anything about it. I understand the use permit. I think it's probably the best thing in this situation, but as in prior cases, we have no way to revert that back. So that's just probably what I'd be comfortable with. And if this system worked going forward, considering this is the first option out of the gate, then maybe we come back and look and saying, are we comfortable letting planning staff administratively approve it and do the tiers again? That's my 2 cents.
Anyone else have any input? Commissioner Simon?
Can I ask a question to staff? Am I able to do that at this point?
I'll allow it.
Okay. I appreciate that. Ashley, I don't, what currently, when we have projects presented to staff, how many deviations on parking are we seeing? And where would this fall with regards to what, I mean, are we creating, I understand where Commissioner Fay's at, and I understand where Commissioner Bonke's at. I would agree, I see a lot of multifamily where we've got, Z lots, or we've got high-density multifamily where we just doesn't seem like we ever have enough parking, and especially now when we've got one-bedroom apartments being shared by 4 people. I mean, it's just, and not, it's probably an overstatement. But when we receive requests for reductions, what are we talking about? I mean, are we talking one a year? Are we talking every project that comes in where people are looking for reductions? Where are we at on that?
Chairman and Commissioner, we probably field inquiries for parking reductions, maybe a handful a year. It isn't a significant amount, but in terms of applications that we're processing, it's much fewer because we don't have the tools in our code right now to address it. It very limited scenarios where it is permitted, but we aren't seeing people regularly asking for reductions. They're in scenarios where it's, like I said, largely medical office, sometimes office buildings, we see the requests. Mixed-use development, we see the requests because they've got the shared parking tool. But there aren't a lot of people that come in and ask for it like on a daily or weekly basis.
On a follow-up to that, with an administrative use permit, if you deny it, are they able to appeal it?
They can appeal it
And
to
would that
planning
then come
commission.
to us?
It would.
Because, the other concern I have is that I don't want to make it to where it creates an inordinate amount of work, needless work internally for you, if instead of being able to administratively say, no, don't do this, they say, no, I want to take it all the way to commission, and then you have to put the packets, put it all out, and then they come up here. So that's one of the only concerns I have, is whether by making an adjustment like that, we then create a burden of way too many projects that will be coming, whether that's going to happen. But
And Ashley, you did say they were all appealable, correct? All 3 tiers?
Ava, do you know if administrative relief is what the appeal process is for that? I did say that it's appealable to commission, but I'm doubting myself.
I do believe then they would bring it to commission as
Okay.
part of a packet.
Okay.
Okay. Commissioner Gage?
Thank you, Chair. I'm comfortable with staff making that decision between 1% and 10% reduction. I think they do a really good job filtering what gets to us to begin with, and I think that they're very capable of making that decision on projects that come through.
Well, I think then, if somebody wants to make a motion either way, we can let the votes determine. And if, just to clarify, if we were to say we recommend approval, but changing the administrative use for 10 to 25 so that that's also conditional use, is that an allowable motion?
Chairman, staff was looking at changing the language based on your comments this evening. Ashley has written the language, but it's the 1 to 10%. What if we make that for non-residential uses only? So, and Ashley, if you want to read the changes, please.
Yeah, so it would be for parking reductions, if you happen to have your red line copy in front of you, proposed reductions between 1% and 10% of the total requirement for off-street parking for non-residential development may be approved administratively by planning manager pursuant to admin relief. And then we could add similar language to number 2, propose reductions above 10% and up to 25% of the total requirement for non-residential development, and between 1% up to 25% for residential development may be approved by an administrative use permit. And then we also had a request to include in your motion to allow staff to make additional changes to conform the draft to current LDC Prop 207 requirements.
No, I think that when you were saying that the residential, you said that would be an administrative use permit, 1 to 25? Or
So we would modify number 2 for 1 to 25 to be residential, because we're removing 1 to 10% from item number 1. So then we would just broaden that range on the administrative use permit for residential. Or if you're not comfortable with staff reviewing residential reductions at all, we could bump that to number 3.
Okay, I see. So we could take, if we want to just move residential, if the belief of the commission would be then that would all be conditional use. And then, yeah, I would say that would be, okay. So, I guess entertain a motion then with that stipulation, and I want to make sure that we clearly annotate that so that we are all in agreement that it's working, so. if anybody
Are
would
we
like-
then interested in moving that to number 3? Because my understanding is we don't want residential on administrative, we want it on conditional.
That's how I feel.
So are we okay with that from a staff perspective? Okay, then I'm comfortable making motions for the reasons set forth in a staff report and move to recommend approval to the town council of Z's 23-06 with the changes of the reduction on residential to move that to number 3 and the Prop 207.
And then also, does that also include the change to the use, if the change, or use changes?
Thank you, Elena. I had the one additional modification to add this language: any parking reduction approval shall terminate if the use or use changes to 5.3.4A and B.
I think that's a good change. I don't know that it'll be immensely effective. Again, I think you're going to politically get it shoved down your throat if we try to implement this, but it's a good change if it works.
It's like a no trespassing sign.
Yep.
All right, so.
Or our noise ordinance.
So amend that.
So the motion would just add that.
Would add
additional
that,
request as well.
add the language, section 5.3.4A, parking recommendations, yada, yada. Any parking reduction approval shall terminate if the use of or usage changes.
Okay, we have a motion. Somewhat convoluted, but I think we have a motion. Does anybody like to second that?
I'll second it.
Commissioner Fay with the second. All right. Any further discussion? Not seeing any. Please vote accordingly.
Awesome.
All right. 6-1. Motion passes. Very well now. That'll conclude the non-consent agenda, and it will move us into administrative items. Administrative items are for the commission discussion and action, and to the discretion of the majority of the commission regarding public input requests on only administrative items. Persons wishing to speak on administrative items should complete a public comment card indicating the number in which you wish to speak. We don't have any of those, so we'll go to 13, and we now have what I had jumped the gun to, the approval of last month's Planning Commission minutes. If anybody has any discussion or amendments to that, or possibly a motion.
Chairman, I actually do have a couple changes. So in the minutes on study session item number 2, I'm thinking it should state that we move to initiate the amendment, not approve it. And it was a citizens review, so we should probably state that no one was requested to speak. So if everyone's okay with that, I would move to approve the minutes with that change.
Well, we'll see if there's a second.
I'll second.
Second from Commissioner Simon. Okay. Any more discussion? No? All right, please vote once the machines have, okay. Vote passes unanimously, 7-0. Thank you all. If, just to be sure, Commissioner Bianchi, if you could make sure that that adjustment takes place. Thank you. All right. Now we'll go to the executive session, which we do not have. And then I'll do a report from chairman and members of the commission. Does anyone on the commission like to speak or give any form of report? Not seeing any. I will choose to not see any myself either this time. Thank you all. We will then move on to report from the Planning Services Manager, Ms. Eva.
Just thank you for a wonderful year and wish everybody happy holidays, and we'll see you in the new year.
That's right. We'll see you guys next year. That's the end. Okay. Now, because I've been instructed accordingly, I'd like to entertain a motion to close the meeting.
So moved?
Vice Chairman has moved to adjourn the meeting. Do I have a second?
Second.
We have a second from Commissioner Everett.
Third.
Everyone, please cast your vote on the little machine. Seven votes in, 7 in favor. That's unanimous. This meeting's been gavelled.
It's my turn to second.
I thought about tossing one.